Alicia, welcome to the podcast. How you doing today?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing really well too. Excited about our chat. And I want to start off taking things back to the beginning of your vegetarian journey. And you talk about this in your book. It goes all the way back to 8 years old. You're on an airplane. You're served a lamb chop, and your brother, I'm assuming he's sitting beside you because he starts making a ba ba. I do a terrible lamb voice, but he started bawing at you and it caused an epiphany. So take us back to that time and talk about what went through your mind.
Well, I know it sounds so silly, but I really don't think children, unless they're made aware that a chicken is a chicken, they don't think chicken's chicken. It just doesn't occur to you. And so when he made those sounds, it just freaked me out to my core. Also, because we had been in England and um, I had heard the sounds of, we were in the country and I heard the sounds of cows crying and wailing. It was very strange. And I said, "What is that? What's happening?" And this farmer told me it's the sounds of the mother being pulled away from the baby. She's crying for her baby. And I was 8 and I was, "How, and this is okay with you?" And she said, "Oh, it's completely normal." And it's like, it's completely normal to rip a baby. But my brain didn't think about it like that. I just knew that sounded awful. So once I got on the plane and then he made that sound of the lamb, the whole thing just started to come into place for me, that this is from a creature that had a destiny, a d- had the desire for life. And it just made me really sad, and I didn't wanna be a part of that suffering. I suppose I heard the cries mixed with the sounds, silly sounds my brother was making, and decided that I wanted to be a vegetarian, but I had no one around me at that time that, you know I mean, my dad did something very sweet. He bought me a book on vegetarianism, but I wasn't a cook. I was 8. So, I just sort of did the best I could for a little while of eating ridiculous things and not really, not eating in any kind of nourishing way at the time. So in the end, I went from 8 to 21 in this sort of limbo place, which in my book, The Kind Diet, I call it flirting, where I know it's something I want to do. I try to do it when it's easy, but I'm not going to do it all the time. Right. So that's where I was. And then, of course, when I was 21, I made the big shift.
So you mentioned your dad and the book he gave you. So this was after you had that epiphany on the plane?
Yeah, no, because I declared I was like, I'm going vegetarian. And I had no one in my life who was a vegetarian. I didn't know a vegetarian. I'd never met a vegetarian. And um, not that I was aware of. Again, I'm 8. So it wasn't a big conversation. And in our house, we ate a lot of lamb chops, pork chops, and we're Jewish. We shouldn't have been doing that. And we were having, we ate meat. We ate tons of meat. And I liked meat. I did. Um, I never didn't like any of it. I liked it all. So it was just part of our life, and I didn't know any better, really.
So was the whole family supportive of this decision of yours?
Well, like I said, it didn't really stick very strongly because I suppose I was just your normal 8-year-old selfish little baby. I didn't, I didn't, because there was no example, and all I could think was, okay, well, I'm not going to eat the obvious things that look like animals. So I'm pretty sure I just ate ice cream and French fries and like pasta. I didn't know how to eat beans and vegetables and whole grains. I didn't know to do any of that. I was just a little girl. So I think I pretty quickly gave up on the concept while continuing to know that I didn't want to harm animals, but not being as true to myself as I would have liked to be because I had no example of it or no one was cooking me gourmet vegan food, you know? So yeah, I just flirted for the next bit. But when I turned 21, then by then I'd seen enough veggie people to know that this was not going to kill me. Actually, I didn't even really know with that part. I didn't even know what it would do to my health at that point. When I made the choice, it was because I had seen footage of how animals are raised and killed. And it just, I got to tell you, that was the most awful thing I've ever, it's like your innocence being shattered because there is this idea. that many people into their 60s and 70s have as well, that somehow you're being held by the government, or somehow the society is holding a certain standard or truth. The fact that people still believe that, you know, that their food is good because it wouldn't be out there if it wasn't. Do you know what I mean? That there's no harm in what they're choosing because it's legal, because it's allowed. Well, that's not true. And so when I was 21, I would have told you there's no way they would allow anyone to harm an animal like this. If most people saw how animals were slaughtered for food, I think they would be horrified. It's like Paul McCartney said when he went vegetarian with his wife, they were watching lambs as well, but they saw a lamb go by and they thought to them, they said if slaughterhouses had walls, had glass walls, everyone would be, probably 99% of the people would be vegan because they wouldn't want to participate in that. People love animals. They don't want to harm them. So I think at the time when I finally saw, oh my goodness, this is what's happening, it shook me to my core. I was so upset that no one had told me. Like, it's that innocence of just, how did no one tell me this? Why aren't teachers telling us this? Why isn't the government telling us this? Why aren't people in the streets telling me this? I could not believe that this is allowed and you don't tell anybody. It's just shocking to me. So it took me a while to get back to okay because I was so upset by what I saw. But I went vegan. And at the same time, I had a dog that I had rescued. His name was Samson. And he was this beautiful, sweet, amazing dog. And I would pet him and stroke him, and he'd basically make out with him. He slept in my bed. He's my boyfriend. And and I remember stroking his leg, thinking, this feels like a chicken leg. It's like, what's the difference between this and a chicken's leg? Like the breast of a chicken. It feels so similar. The tendons and the bones and the meat there. And then I thought, okay, so why am I going to be boyfriend and girlfriend with my dog? Basically, not really, but you know what I mean. But then these creatures, cows, pigs, chickens, that all have the same desire to live, and they all are funny, and they don't like it if you punch them, and they like it if you stroke them. Like, why do I decide that those creatures are okay to be tortured and slaughtered and dismembered, but this other dog is, you know, a king? Why? And that was really for me a big thing. And I remember I had a meeting with the organization PETA, and I did a lot of campaigns for them from age, like, I guess like I guess I was 16 until 21, that I was doing all these things for them. Um, because I was an animal lover and I wanted to be an animal activist. I cared so much about animals, but I wasn't making the choice yet. And so when I had this meal with them, and this was the day, the like deciding day that never looked back. I was talking to them and they were telling me things about what was happening. And I remember getting all riled up again, like, what are you doing this? And are you doing this? And Lisa Lange and Dan Matthews both sat there so patiently and sweetly, and they were so kind. They never said you should go vegan. They never said anything even remotely like that. They just said, um, they just told me that what was happening and could I help? And I was like, well, are you doing this? And then it occurred to me as I was driving away, like, I'm the problem. Until I stop choosing this food, it will continue, period. That's the solution. And so I went home and I told my then boyfriend, who turned into my husband, who's now just my son's father, because he's been in my life for that many years. I said to him, I'm going to go vegan tonight, and let's eat up everything in the house. Like, don't want to waste anything. But after that, I'm going vegan. And he said, okay, me too. And so we did it together, and that's what happened.
It didn't take any convincing, eh?
No, you know what he said? He said, I like, because I was telling him about the pigs. It was the pig slaughter that got me so upset, that PETA was telling me about and what was happening. And he said, I love pigs too, which I thought was so sweet and supportive and lovely. And so we did it together at the time.
You talked about a film around the time you were 21 when you went vegan that kinda helped spur this change in diet. What was the film?
Well, I went to a conference called Animal Rights. I think it's called Animal Rights conference. I don't know, it was in 2000, I think. Around that time was The Witness. It was a really great film about this guy who doesn't like animals. It was a good story. Yeah.
Do you remember back when you were 8 years old, the book that your dad gave you?
It was blue. I know that. It's just a blue cookbook. I'm not sure what it was called. I actually looked at it recently and then decided to let go of it because I didn't. I was purging my books. But I did save it all these years.
So, talk about when you guys decide to make this dietary switch together. It's nice that you're doing it together as a couple, you have that support. What was it like in the beginning? Because this, you had dabbled with vegetarianism on and off, but, going vegan is another step down the continuum. So, talk about what that was like in the early days.
It was really lovely. I think having a partner to do it with is so wonderful. And we had such a good time cooking together and preparing food together. And, it was really sweet. I mean, I can liken it to now with my son where he we love doing this together. He and I cook together. We have so much fun in the kitchen. He cooks for me. I mean, it's amazing. He's 9 and he cooks for me. I'm so lucky. Um, but yeah, it's beautiful to share it with someone. I think being alone in it is really probably wonderful because you get the health benefits and you get to feel good about yourself and sleep well at night knowing you're not contributing to suffering and all of that. But I think that having a partner in it, my goodness, nothing could be better than that.
Any ideas for people out there who might want to make a switch like this or any kind of dietary switch and their partner isn't on board? And it's hard enough to make one home cooked healthy meal, but making two is quite challenging. So, what do you say to somebody who's in that boat?
I love the idea that, so I imagine when I meet a new partner in my life, let's say they don't do the same thing that I do. Um, but I would imagine, well, the partner that I would pick, I would imagine would be at least open, right? And enjoy the food that I make. And, so it wouldn't be an issue. But I guess when I think about people making this change, and I think about if the partner was to say, well, I want you to make animal food for me, that I don't understand. If this is the thing that you care about, you can't ask me to cook for you flesh like that. And I hear a lot of people do continue to do that. And but that's just sort of what they have to do. But that doesn't sound like a very nice, healthy relationship to me. I don't want to, I don't understand that. Like your values are more important than my values. Like, you know, you cook it. So a lot of people end up having that person just cook that part of the meal for themselves. I have a friend who does that. She doesn't cook the meat. That's not true. She actually cooks tons of meat. She's the one of the people I wonder, like, why are you doing this? You don't even believe in it. But I think she has resolved to like, you cook it and I'll make all the other yummy stuff. So I guess you do the best you can. If you've been married to someone for a really long time and you make this change, I don't know, it's difficult. But my suggestion would be to just make delicious food and not to make a fuss about it and to not really talk about it. If to share the things that are inspiring to you, show them the movie Game Changers, show them the movie Cowspiracy if they're into the environment, show them Forks Over Knives so they can see from doctors and from a health point of view. Have them read the Kind Diet, have them read books about all of this so that they're informed. And if they're not interested in any of that, then I would say just make delicious food and seduce them by their tummies. I know that really works.
So, when you go vegan all the way back in 1998, were there a lot of other celebrities on to this kind of diet and advocating for it?
I don't remember. I know I'm sure there were. I'm just trying to think of who was the person that I knew was vegan. I mean, there's so many people now, and you hear like people like Prince was, and Bruce Lee was, and um, Naratilova was, and but when I went vegan, I'm sure there were. I'm just blanking on who was vegan. There was River Phoenix, but he was already passed by the time I was. So then there's Joaquin Phoenix, but I don't think I knew him when I went vegan. Well, definitely Woody Harrelson.
You and Woody Harrelson are friends, right?
Yes.
You shared a little story in your book about you and Woody getting together and and bonding over vegan food and the vegan lifestyle. Talk about first meeting him.
Well, we're talking about it being lonely, and I was lonely in the beginning of making this choice. I mean, for various reasons in my personal life, but also I just felt a bit I was going through a hard time in general, and being vegan was even more isolating. So it was like, you know, just complicated times being really famous, being really young, being and being vegan, and when and finding that talking about it with people, no one was very interested. No one really cared. And I felt like I was walking around screaming fire, rape, murder, like in the streets essentially. And everybody's like, I don't care. What? I don't care. So that's hard when you have something that you know is so not okay and no one cares that much. That was really hard. And so I remember being at a PETA. I went to um, a PETA event that the Pretenders played at, Chrissy Hine, that's so cool, and then, and Paul McCartney played, and they were honoring many people, and I was one of the people that was honored, and I remember getting this letter from Paul McCartney from the Beatles, wrote me a letter honoring me for this event, and I was so it was just so felt so good. So I went to this, and, I remember looking over at uh, Woody Harrelson and thinking, I've seen him at a bunch of these events, and but I haven't spoken to him. He just seemed cool. He was sitting on the floor with his wife and a bunch of people. And I just thought, oh, they just seem like my people. And so I called him, I think a month or two later, and I said, hi, I'm feeling really sad about what's happening to the cows and the pigs. Can we talk about it? And, what can we do? And he said, well, do you want to come to Peru with me? And I was like, okay, sure. He goes, well, we'll go help save the rainforest. And I thought that sounded like a really fun, good idea. So we did. And that's how we became friends.
And what was that adventure like? Talk about what you guys got up to.
Oh, it was beautiful. We were canoeing down the Amazon River. We were eating amazing. Oh my God, they would make these tamales. The vegan tamales were so incredible in Peru. And we would have I remember Laura, Woody's wife, brought this goddess dressing that I had never had before, and this goddess dressing is making me want it right now. We would put it on all these pickled vegetables that they would make, and it was divine, and we had painted fruit every day, which is a recipe in my book called Crocodile Crunch, and, and we would have, like Laura would bring with her so she was so inspiring to me because she would bring with her her almond butter and her what else was spirulina, and then she would sort of gather, a little, and probably she brought maple syrup too, I suppose. But somehow she would make this yummy sauce that would be bright green, and it was spirulina, hemp, um, like hemp milk or any kind of non-dairy milk, or and a little. You could put orange juice in there. Sometimes I do that, and spirulina. What else is in there? Oh, and nut butter. And it just makes this green, delicious, insane sauce and pour it over wherever you are. We went to Cuba together actually a long time ago, and we made it all across Cuba as we were driving around across country. So, um, you can kind of make when you have these little tricks, you can make do anywhere with anything, which was lovely, and they really taught me that. So I had um, I had such a good time on that trip, and I it made me realize that it was really that this was I was already so passionate clearly to make the choices, but I saw in them a way of living that was not attached to the work that we do as artists, that we can appreciate and enjoy that, but it was okay to also leave it all behind if you didn't like it. And so I sort of was like, forget that. I'm not interested in the acting right now. I just want to focus on trying to heal this world and do what I can.
Earlier, you talked about the isolation you were feeling. And I know after Clueless, huge movie, huge success, you're the star of the movie, you talked about feeling isolated. You think, you have all these different opportunities, money, different options coming at you and all kinds of people that want to connect with you. Talk more about that isolation, what that was like and what you did to get through that.
Well, I think it's really complicated and hard to express because it's so deeply personal. But I think just I think that the easiest way for me to express it and is that I was very young and and having and didn't have solid uh, people in my life to sort of ground the whole to sort of like I wish I'd had an amazing therapist. That would have solved the problem. Really, that would have solved so many problems. But I didn't. I didn't even know about that. And so, you're just trying so hard to figure out. And I didn't. I, I I didn't like being famous, to be really honest. I just didn't like what came with it. At the time. I didn't. And I feel like I also got further away from what I had initially started, which was I loved acting. And I was in this sort of weird bubble that was um, controlled. It's complicated and it's hard for me to express, especially since I've been up since 4 o'clock in the morning. So I'm not sure I can put my finger on it right now, but I could say that I was able to turn it into, I just said, I'm not interested in this. So I'm going to do what I'm interested in. And I'm going to put all my focus over here. And so my focus went into, you know, trying to figure out how to live as responsibly and as ethically as possible. So every single choice I made from, I had in my life, I met people along the way who taught me about, why are you using plastic bags? And I would say, oh, well, they gave it to me at the grocery store. And my friend said, well, but you don't have to take it. I don't. And she's saying, no, bring your own bags.
What I think is really beautiful about your journey is that you learn, you evolve, and then you're sharing it and using your huge platform to share it for good and to turn other people on to this new way of living and new way of eating. So what do you think it is, Alicia, about you specifically, because you could have just kept learning and applying it in your own lifestyle and becoming healthy, sharing it with your family, close friends, but you've decided to use your platform, like I said, for good and spread it out to the world. What do you think it is about you that, made that decision and decided to be so open and vocal?
Well, I think that I've always been a truth seeker. And so I really don't like it when things are not true or don't add up. It really bothers my brain. And this was one of those things where, I mean, also, I don't know how everyone isn't in an uproar about this. People come together about certain subjects and you go, wow, they really collected a lot of people around this issue. But for some reason, our our home, our earth, we don't have time. We just don't have time. And we've been saying that for 20 years. They've been saying that for 40 years. And here we are with about 10 more years to turn this thing around. And when will we all collectively decide that the air that we breathe matters and that the food that we eat matters? The water you drink, our water is so toxic. You have to use an osmosis filter to clean that out. Most people can't afford that. That is not okay. And it's because they put all these chemicals into the water. And then you have the food system. I mean, I could go on and on, but your food is, if you're not buying organic, farmers market, clean vegetables and fruits, if you're eating animals, it is not healthy. And so why do I feel so passionately about it is because it's unjust. It's injustice. It's not okay. It's not okay with me to rape the earth for money. It's corporate greed. That's the villain. The big villain of the story is corporate greed, and I cannot stand by and allow it to happen. And so I've always felt that way. I've said no to campaigns involving, big corporation, big products that are just not okay. And I think a lot of artists, they just, I guess they're okay with just taking money and they're not aware or they don't care about, what that company does. But I just cannot do that. I've never been able to do it. I cannot support cruelty. I will not support cruelty in any way, not in any way. So I don't know. It just seems natural to me. It seems it's I would ask the opposite question. How is everyone not? I don't feel like it's some special thing that I do. I appreciate the question. I don't feel special in my doing it. I feel like how is flabbergasted that the rest of the world isn't. And there are many people who are. There are wonderful people who are. And people came before me and people come after me. I mean, so grateful for Greta, the young girl who's making such a huge stink about everything in the environment. It's wonderful that people are listening to her. She's vegan, duh, because she cares about the earth. She knows that we cannot continue this way. So there are wonderful people doing wonderful things, but in general, yeah, I don't understand how we're not. I don't understand how it isn't front page exciting news every single day. What's happening to the water? What's happening to your food? What's happened? People are hungry. 2 million people die a year from hunger. And we don't have a lack of food. We just feed it to cows, and the amount of calories that you can produce from creating cow food, like a steak, versus the calories you can produce using the food that you fed the cow, it's just such an inefficient use of resources. We are wasting our resources, and we are wasting food, and it's killing people. So I don't know. I don't want to see people starve to death. I don't want to see people not be able to breathe in communities because they're being dumped on with all the toxic sludge. It's insane to me that corporations are allowed to get away with awful, awful behavior. When Obama ran for office, I remember why I went on the campaign trail for him with Matt Damon was because I was so excited about the carbon tax. Like, what a great thing to say, oh, hi, corporation, you want to do terrible things? Great, you'll be taxed for it. Oh, you want to do great things? You'll be rewarded for it. It's such a civilized concept. Unfortunately, he was stopped at every angle from doing it. But my goodness, if we could do that, we would be dealing with such a different situation if everyone was responsible and held accountable for the damage that they do.
Well, I give you a lot of credit for putting your message out there because it would be a lot easier to not say anything and go about your different projects and not stick your neck out on the line and share some uncomfortable at times subjects. And you haven't been, navigating totally unscathed. I mean, we could go back to 2012 and when you were feeding your son, you were chewing something up and feeding him from your mouth. And I was watching a clip on that before the interview here, and people are gonna jump all over you for this alternative way of living and vocalizing and sharing it with the world. So, again, I just wanna, commend you for taking not taking the easy path and putting yourself out there.
Thank you. I mean, in that particular case, I was really uh, unaware of how many people were going to pay attention. I didn't know my small, tiny little community was going to be had so many eyeballs on it. Um, but I did think it was a beautiful thing that happened naturally, and later learned not only that I think it was Harvard that put out a study afterwards. It was like a big, um, middle finger to everyone that took issue with it because describing that it actually boosts the child's immune system and was good for them not to have allergies and all these things. And so I was really, again, it was ahead of its time in terms of what mainstream can handle, but it was not, I didn't invent it. Bear invented it. He didn't invent it. It's been going on since the beginning of time. It's how people have fed their children, and people all over the world still do it. And it's just what people do in different communities. We've become so sterile. We breastfeeding is like breastfeeding is what you do to feed your child, period. But I think when you come from a sort of rich community, or, our culture has become American culture has become sort of like choosing to whether or not to breastfeed. And of course, anyone can choose whether they want to breastfeed or not, but it's not like a revolutionary concept. The boobs were made to breastfeed, period. They're made for feeding your child. So that's what God or universe or whatever created to feed them. There isn't another choice. There wasn't another choice in the beginning of time. That's how you feed them or they die. And but it's become it's shameful somehow, and it's like you have to reintroduce it. And it's just because, again, corporate greed. Someone came in, wanted to sell a product, so they wanted to make you feel weird and bad about doing the most natural thing in the world, right? So yeah, it's a bummer. We have to keep sort of reminding people that we're human. Same with the immune system, right? We're all think so many people have forgotten that we we were designed to have these really healthy immune systems. That when you eat food that nourishes your organs and heals you, you feel good and you don't get sick. And if you do, it's really simple and easy, like quick six. Quick sick. It's nothing big deal. You're not on the couch for 3 weeks dying. You know what I mean? You're just like, "Oh, I'm coughing a little bit or I snot a little bit." We have forgotten that everything is provided for us in nature, and so we look outside of ourselves all the time. We don't look inside to see that we are responsible for our health, that we are responsible for ourselves, and that there is so much that we can do to make a difference, and, I think that's really empowering. I think it's really exciting. When I figured out that I could take my health back, that I actually could. When I went vegan, I did it for the animals. I didn't do it for my health. At the time, I was being, mm, mm, I would say I was going the opposite direction because people were calling me fat. So I was like, great, I'm going to eat as much as I want, whenever I want. It's going to be, I'm going great. That's when I was like, I'm out. Right. So, you sort of, you, I didn't care about health. It was the animals that saved me because of my love and care for animals. It made me realize, well, it didn't make me realize it happened to me. So I went vegan for the animals and I didn't know what was going to happen. And suddenly I don't have an asthma inhaler anymore. I don't have allergy shots twice a week anymore. My skin clears up. All the cystic acne goes away. My eyes get really white. My nails get strong. All these brittle nails that were falling apart are strong. You can't bend them at all. Started to lose weight and everything felt good. I felt so spiritually, I felt good because I was no longer taking part in something I didn't believe in. I was standing my principles and I could look myself in the eye and be like, you're doing what you believe in. You're doing good. And I could look at my dog in his eyes and be like, I'm not hurting your people or your kind. And but I also just felt lighter because all the guck was coming out of me. I was detoxing all this icky stuff that had been in my system for so long. And I was starting to feel alive and awake and energized. And through that journey, I then started to do research on it and understand that this is the way of the warriors. This is the way that really great athletes eat. This is you could watch Game Changers to have some confirmation on that, but there are athletes that have eaten this way for so long because not because they love animals, not because they care about the earth, but because they care about performance and recovery, inflammation. So that's quite interesting. And then I saw all the science from Harvard studies and medical journals, and that shows that when you eat this way, you're lessening your chances significantly from cancer and heart disease and diabetes and it's endless. So I started to realize that this was not I thought it was good karma, that I was just being gifted this great health because of my choice to not harm animals. It's one way of looking at it, but truly it's just the way of the warrior. You want to feel amazing, you want to be a superhero, this is the way to eat.
You talked about all those health benefits that you ended up receiving from being on this diet, but you also mentioned the detox period. So talk about that. How long did that last and what were some of the symptoms that you faced?
Well, I don't remember having a bad detox period. I mean, there was one when I did a cleanse. That was bad because then you're really going deep into it. But the journey for me from from regular meat eater to vegan, I don't remember feeling anything too significant. But a lot of people do report feeling, sometimes they get really gassy because they're like letting go of a lot of stuff, and then they're fine. But it's just letting it go, the old stuff. That some people get really tired and have dips in energy, so they could hold that. They could think, oh, that's because I'm not eating meat that I'm tired, but it's not that. It's your body's like getting all the sludge out of it, and on the other side of it is this rush of insane energy. Um, because it's similar with like when I did an actual cleanse. I remember the very first cleanse I did. I was 21, and I remember you're so irritable and just so hungry and everything's coming out everywhere. Just you're just sort of your body's letting go, but on the other side of it, it was like I was reborn. I mean, it was incredible. So
What
I
was the cleanse?
oh, it just, eating, you stop eating. I think I did it for 7 days, and, you don't eat. I didn't eat any. I get nutrition. I got nutrition from green juice, and I had soup, vegetable soup, and I had different teas, but essentially I was just not eating for 7 days and just consuming, um, the nutrients through liquid, and my God, it was really incredible, the feeling. But that's the same feeling I get from just eating a clean meal. When I make a macrobiotic healing meal, in my book, I call it superhero food. But making greens and a healthy meal makes me feel the same way. It's not so different. So you don't have to do a cleanse to feel that way.
Do you cleanse at all anymore?
I do. I love cleansing. I do so
What
much.
are some of the cleanses you do?
It's same thing.
Oh, okay.
It's just me. It's not a particular cleanse. It's just allowing my body to take a rest if I've been too indulgent, really, truly. If I've had too much chocolate. Sometimes there's this really amazing chocolate company and they're not allowed to send me chocolate anymore. I can't because it's so yummy. But it's when sometimes if I'm about to get my period or something, I'll go a little crazy. Or if I'm traveling with my son, there's just times where I play. I like playing. And so I always go back to my foundation, my healing diet, and that's where I stick with. But every once in a while I'd like to do a good cleanse because it just makes me feel amazing on top of feeling amazing from eating clean.
What's the chocolate that you love?
Can't tell you, no, I'm gonna tell you. Um, Hue. I think it's called Hue. It's
They're
H.
my favorite too. Incredible.
I mean,
Yeah.
why? Why do they those cashews covered?
Cashew is the one I was gonna say, that's my favorite.
It's the
My
worst.
wife loves the hazelnut, but they're all insane.
Oh, the hazelnut's really good too. I think the hazelnut and the raspberry nut butter one is insane too, but the cashew is off the charts.
Hugh is incredible.
But not the cashew bar. I'm talking cashews covered in chocolate. Is that the one you're talking about?
Oh, no, I'm talking about the cashew bar, the one that has, like, the cashew butter, I think, within the squares.
Yeah, you now you need to go try it's actual cashews covered in chocolate. It's a whole other level. It's awful.
I'll have to find those. So, at one point, Alicia, you got into the raw food diet, so where along your vegan journey was that, and does that still play a role in your day-to-day eating?
No, that was like me discovering and playing. So I think I got into it probably because of Laura Woody's wife, and I went to Jamaica and we went to Cuba together. And when we were in Jamaica, we went to a raw food convention, and it was so fun. All these raw fooders, and it was on the beach, and it was just an amazing learning experience and incredible time. And I came away from there thinking, okay, I'm going to try and be raw. And okay, so I definitely met Lauren Woody when I was probably 22 or 23 because it was that's sort of the time. I'm getting the timeline. So then I was doing raw. I had a lot of raw friends, chefs, that were raw, and I would go and I remember one time Giuliano, a chef, was cooking for or uncooking for Pierce Brosnan. He was making this beautiful meal for him. So I went as his assistant, just as his assistant to like help serve. And every time I see Pierce Brosnan out in the world, he always remarks on this that because it was very funny. They were all sort of at the table and they look up and I'm like, hi, I want to give you this. And like, what are you doing? But I was so into it. I just loved making the food with him and preparing it. And it was really delicious. But I have to say that raw food for me, I really believe that there's a place for it. It's good if you're trying to do a cleanse. It's good if you're, a meat eater and you're coming off. It's very cleansing to the body, but I believe in my experience that it's not the way for healing, the deep, long, sustainable healing and for transitioning. I don't think ultimately you're going to get people. I have a lot of feelings about raw food. I think if you like it, great, eat it. But I just don't think I think there's some foods that really need to be cooked and that it's nourishing. I think raw foods are very focused on nutrition and enzymes. But that's not all of what health is. If you look at Chinese medicine and look at the yin and yang of things, it isn't all an isolate, like, it's like the concept of taking all the kale and all the good things and shoving it in a blender and it's like it's blender of food versus making a lovely nourishing soothing stew of deep root vegetables for the climate. Like if it's cold outside, you really, and I experienced this because I did a play on Broadway called The Graduate with Kathleen Turner, and I remember it was snowing and I was raw. So I was trying to find my green juice and I was trying to find my mangoes and I was trying to find my coconuts. And I remember someone saying to me, "None of those things grow here. It's snowing." And I was like, "Oh, that's interesting. That's an interesting point." And this macrobiotic lady told me, why, if a plant, when you have a plant that likes sunlight and likes heat, you don't put it in a cold climate to grow it. That's not what the condition is. So your body, if your body's in the cold, you're kind of like a plant. It needs the things to nourish that cold. So that made a lot of sense to me. And it also made sense to me from an environmental point of view of not wanting your food to travel so far. This idea that I was taking coconuts from Thailand was like, that's a long way for it to come. How about just eat the kale that's growing right now? So that concept started to stay true to me. And I saw the benefits immediately. Actually, my body changed a lot from everything changed again. Like I went through a new wave of change from switching from raw food to macrobiotics. So now I just live in this very decadent, delicious plant-based life that I can flow and do as I wish. I can play a little, have some huge chocolate, but I also know where to go back to. And so yeah, raw food is not something I try to eat, but I do appreciate it. Sometimes things are delicious, but in general, I mean, I do. I remember Giuliano. We would hang out and we'd go to the farmer's market. It's making my mouth water thinking about it, and grab tomatoes from the farmer's market, and we would just eat a bunch of tomatoes, like just like this, or avocado. Just bite into the avocado and start eating the avocado. So it gave me a real appreciation for how beautiful something is untouched. That was wonderful. But I also think I'm sure there's a way to eat raw in a very balanced manner, but I don't appreciate a dehydrator. It doesn't make sense to me. Taking all the moisture out of food doesn't make any sense. And it doesn't make sense to me to be blending everything, although I do appreciate a blender here and there. But also, it was sort of so heavy on the oil. I could eat a pie in raw food diet. You can eat a pie for breakfast. So I would eat a pie that was made of nuts, seeds, and fruit. And for me, that's an acne. That's just giving myself a mask of acne and rashes. It's too much for the intestines. It's too much. Damp heat, really, is what they would say in Chinese medicine. It's just it's an excess of fat and oil, and not that those things aren't wonderful, but not in that amount. So I just stepped away from it. It's not where I land, but I do appreciate it, and I love anyone that's raw because it means they're vegan. So it makes me happy. But it's definitely not what I don't think of it as a way to get people on board with this lifestyle.
Come back to the macrobiotic diet because I know in the beginning it was your husband that introduced you to the idea and he wanted to go macrobiotic and you resisted in the beginning. So tell that story and how you came around to embracing it.
Yeah, I didn't want to because again, it was sort of similar. I guess I can be stubborn at times. It's similar to the concept of when Woody was talking about the environment. And I was like, but I'm already vegan. So again, with macrobiotics, I was like, I'm already vegan. Do I also have to, like, what? I'm not allowed to have avocado, which isn't true at all. But I thought that macrobiotics meant you couldn't have avocado. And I thought that macrobiotics were for sick people because the understanding I had about macrobiotics was it was cured cancer, which is pretty good. It cures cancer. But I didn't really I thought of it as what people do when they're sick. And oh, and I knew they ate fish. So I was like, I don't want to be on a diet where uh, where people eat fish. Like I don't need to, I just was closed off to it. But then I got my husband, Christopher, at the time, we're no longer married, but I got him a gift certificate because it was Christmas, it was his birthday, and I wanted to get him a certificate to a counselor. And I had just happened to be on a walk with a girl named Temple. We were walking from Candle Cafe in New York City. It's like 45 blocks back to my apartment. And she told me the story of, she looked completely different. Like I hadn't seen her in a while, but she transformed head to toe. she looked stunning and so radiant and so healthy. And she told me her story of what had happened. And she had she had worked with a macrobiotic counselor, and they identified right away just by looking at her that there was something going on with her liver, which she knew about from she'd been struggling with her whole life. And anyway, it transformed her health. And so when she said that, I went, okay, why is this coming at me from all these angles? And I'm going to get a certificate for my husband from where Temple went. So I got him a meeting with this woman, Andrea Beeman. And Andrea Beeman is the one who told me this stuff. I was sitting in the back, like, so stupid, whatever. Just whatever. But she said to me at the end, she said, I can clear up all your acne that you're having right now. And, and all my skin problems had gone away when I was vegan, but I just got off the birth control pill. And then everything kind of came out again. And so she's like, we can fix that. And she's the one who pointed out where things were growing. And anyway, it was incredible, life changing.
Let's talk about getting pregnant. You were vegan a long time before getting pregnant. Were there any special considerations getting pregnant, being on that type of diet?
No, that's why I wrote The Kind Mama. If you want to get pregnant, you want to eat the kind diet because it helps you. It helps with your fertility. The easiest way for me to explain it is that if things are not working, if you have a broken house, if there's like a leak, you know, if there's swollen, whatever is going on inside what I call the baby house, because the baby has to live in a house inside of your body, right? The placenta exists in your body. And so you are the house for the baby. And if you're not if you're out of balance and things are not well, then a baby doesn't really want to thrive there. You're not giving it its best start. So, so yeah, the Kind Mama goes into great detail about how to have the most uh, well body that welcomes a baby into it. So yeah, there's no considerations when trying to get pregnant. It's you want to consider eating this way to get pregnant. If that makes sense.
But when you were pregnant, I think it might have been a naturopath that talked about a prenatal, and that got you thinking and eventually led to you creating your supplement line.
Yes, thank you. So what happened was so exactly what I'm saying. My midwife said to me, you should take a prenatal. And I said, why would I take a prenatal? I eat perfectly. She said, do you eat perfectly every single day? I said, well, I mean, no, but mostly. And she said, yeah, but what about when you're traveling or, when you're working and you can't get the food that you need? And I said, oh, okay. I get it. So sort of take a prenatal for insurance purposes, potentially when I need it. She said, yeah, like I can get behind that. Fine, you win. So I go looking, she suggests a prenatal and I go look and I didn't like the look of that one. So I go looking at others. And the reason I didn't like the one she sent me, it was vegan, but it was chemicals, just total chemicals, not made from food. And then I started looking at all these other ones and the ones that were the best top of the line on the market. They were all made with, sometimes they had some clean ingredients in them, but then they were wrapped in chemicals. So ultimately, I was just torn and thinking, why would I take something for my body that's less healthy than what I eat? This doesn't make sense to me at all. What's going on here? So then I, did tons of research and it just turned out that no one was making any vitamins in a really, really clean way. And so I set out to make them and I went looking for a partner and I found a partner in Garden of Life. They were very excited about what I wanted to do and we teamed up and did it together and we co-created My Kind Organics. And it's the first ever certified organic, non-GMO verified, all food based, no fillers, no binders. It's just nutrition. And when you look at the label, you'll see like broccoli, instead of some chemical you can't pronounce.
So I'm assuming this came out years after you had your baby. Was there a prenatal you found that you ended up taking while you're pregnant?
I don't think so. There was nothing that I was comfortable taking. I may have taken I remember I was dabbling and I took one that was the vegan one. I don't think so because I was so upset that it was vegan but not natural. So I just think I ate really clean and I was willing to, I'm pretty sure, I don't remember exactly, but I'm pretty sure I just gave up on the concept and was like, I eat perfect, I'm fine.
You mentioned midwife there. Did you end up giving birth in your home?
Well, I talk about all of that in The Kind Mama, the whole birth story, but I intended to give birth in my home, and that was the plan, but that's not where Bear was born.
How did you guys come up with the name Bear?
My ex-husband's mother, who's very, very proud Republican conservative woman, she came up with the name. I think it's so funny that she's super conservative Republican, cute little lady who came up with this very sort of, you could say, hippie name, but it is the name of a very famous Jewish boxer. So that's what convinced my dad it was cool.
Cool. So Bear is now 9 years old. He's vegan, correct?
Yeah.
And does he resist that at all? Has he had any temptation to dabble into meat or is
He has tons of temptation in terms of people always offer it to him, and I've offered it to him just in the terms of, like, if I remember he told me one time he really wanted to try ham, and because I think a friend at school was having it. He was so young. He was just, I think he was 4. And I said, "You can try it, baby." And he said, "I can?" I said, "Yeah, you can try it." And he was like, "Okay." And then he didn't. And then it was on his birthday, we were at he wanted to go for pizza, so we went to a pizza place, and he was prepared. You know how they have a screen, like a, what's that thing called? It's like a plastic or glass divider, and the food, you can see it right under there. And anyway, a little piece of pepperoni had kind of gone halfway under, and it was sitting there. And I went, and he looked at it, and he goes, and I said, "Do you want to have it? Take it." He was like, so he said no, and he wouldn't take it. And so I think he just dabbled with the idea of it at times, but I've given him every opportunity to have it, and he doesn't take it. So somebody asked him just the other day, "Bear, when are you going to start eating meat?" And he said, "I'm never going to start eating meat." And then he said, "Well, when are you going to try meat for the first time?" He said, "Maybe when I'm 14." I said, "What's this arbitrary number?" He's like, "I don't know." So,
how's his health?
oh, he's amazing. He's never needed any antibiotics. He's never needed any. I mean, that's incredible. Just want to pause on that. Most children, by the time they're 9, have taken antibiotics so many times for ear infections. He has never needed any of that. So he's doing okay. He's doing more than okay. He's of course, if he needed something, I would never ever hold back something that could help my kid. It's just that he's so healthy and so strong, and has net. I think the entire time he's been alive, there's been maybe 2 times where he said, "Don't feel good. I'm going to lay down for a second." I mean, 2 times. When he gets sick, what it looks like is, "I'm going to climb a tree," and there's a little snot running down his nose. I know he's got snot running down his nose, so he's fighting something, but his energy level is still, like, he's just healthy boy.
And I saw you recently shared on your social media that he cut his long hair. And there was an article talking about you posted how there was some controversy there over him being made fun of, and it you ended up talking at the top on your post about how that wasn't the case. That's not why he did that. So talk about was had he grown his hair since he was a baby? Because it was quite long.
How it was reported, it was completely wrong, per usual. Um, so I can tell you that. But what had happened was he has really beautiful, beautiful long hair. I mean, some mornings he wakes up and I just go, "Oh, like, your hair is so gorgeous." And I don't know when he started growing his hair, but he has had long hair for a long time now. Because I remember when he was in kindergarten, he wore a headband, but it was still like just down to here. But and then I think about 2.5 years ago, he was going to a surf camp and he was on the bus, and these kids were calling him a girl. And he kept trying to convince them he was not a girl. And he told me the story when he got home, and I thought, "Oh, poor little guy." But I also knew that most people who walk down the street will say, "Oh my God, dude, your hair is amazing." That's what he hears most of the time. Um, but I don't think he cares either way, because he's just really solid in himself. He's not. That's what I was so proud of. I'm so proud of him. So anyway, he comes home from this day of telling me the story. "Mommy, this is what happened on the bus today, going to surf camp." And I was like, "Oh, baby." And it just so happened I was getting my hair cut the next day, and so was he. We get our hair cut together. And so we were going to get our hair cut together, and I assumed that he would want to cut it, right? That's the assumption, because he's been mistaken for. So that was the only time he'd been made fun of, I should say. In the years of his life, everyone thought he was a girl. That's just normal. That was all the time. But I don't think thinking someone's a girl is making fun of them. I think they just thought he was a girl because they don't have the imagination to look beyond the hair. Whereas when he'd be in Hawaii or in Bali, where people are more islanders, like they would always know he was a boy because they looked at his energy. They looked at his spirit. They didn't look at his hair because men can have long hair and they've always had long hair. So I think that it was his experience all the time. And 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 it didn't seem to bother him very much. He never seemed to say to me like, God, I wish people didn't think I was a girl, ever. It just didn't wasn't an issue for him. And so but I don't think he was like, yeah, people think I'm a girl. I think it just was something that was what was, right? And so then he's on the bus and he has that experience. We go to the hair salon and I'm thinking, here we go. He's gonna cut it today. And he said, and the guy says, what do you want to do with your hair, Bear? He goes, I want it down to my waist. So he was like, can you give me a trim so it can get down to my waist? Because he knew that the more you trim it, the longer it grows. And I just thought, that's my boy. Like, he doesn't even care. So that was the story I had posted a few months ago, but it was about something. And I said in that post, it was something that happened 2 years ago. So when he cut his hair, one thing had absolutely nothing to do with the other, if you can see what I'm saying. But he did decide to cut his hair.
So we talked about PETA before, and I know at one point you ended up doing a billboard for PETA, a nude billboard. What year was that in, and how did that all come about?
I don't remember what year that was, but I did a few PETA campaigns. So the first one I did, well, I've done many since I was like 16. I've been doing PETA campaigns, but I did one a while back that was a vegetarian commercial. It was like Go Vegetarian, I think. And I kind of climb out of the water, and people made all kinds of funny skits about that too. Um, but that was one that I did, and I was naked, but you couldn't see anything. And then this one I did with Brian Bowen Smith. He's a wonderful photographer, and I love working with him. And sometimes your your mission is not heard. People, you can talk about and you can write about what's happening to sheep to get wool, but it doesn't mean anyone's going to listen or print it or hear it. So sometimes you have to do something to get their attention. So that was the idea. And I never ever do anything with nudity in film. I've never done it. I've always just not needed to do it, and I've always avoided it. And so it was okay with me to do it for this because A, you're just seeing my butt, but also because it felt like, and I would never do that on film, like I said, but I felt safe to do it here because it was from something that I care about so much. And I hoped that knowing that I never do nudity and then doing it for this would tell you how much I care, if that makes sense.
It was for the right reason. So pre-pandemic, coming back to Bear, he went to Waldorf school,
Yeah.
and what can you talk about what Waldorf is like versus a traditional public type school?
Well, Waldorf is a school that's all over the world. Rudolf Steiner came up with it, I think, 100 years ago. I think we just celebrated 100 years of Waldorf education. It's really beautiful and really sweet. It's sort of an extension of Rye. I don't know if you've ever heard of Rye, but when you have little people in your life, Rye is a system also where they really see the child and they speak to children in such a beautiful way. And so, anyway, Waldorf is it's actually has nothing to do with Rye in terms of where it's born from, but I'm just giving people in case they know about Rye, they'll be like, oh, I kind of know what that means. Um, but Waldorf is, they don't have any plastic. Everything is nature and wood. Like when he was really little, he would chop the vegetables in class and they would make soup. They made their own bread. That this was part of their schooling, and this is when they were in babies, tiny babies. Um, but they just learn, you know, when they go to first grade, they start knitting. They're doing woodwork. They make their own needles with they make their own knitting needles with the wood and the shaving, and they just learn really. I don't know how to explain it, but I saw every single school in Los Angeles, and nothing compares to Waldorf. It's the education is so beautiful, and we've done it in New York, we've done it in Chicago, and we've done it in Atlanta, and all of them share. they're all the same. They're all different in that they're in a different state, but they're so the way they I'm sorry, I'm not doing a good job of explaining this, but the easiest way I can explain it is that the kids who go through Waldorf and end up in high school will look you in the eye and say, "Hello, how are you?" They can talk to you. They're centered in their body. They're not like they're just trying to get back to their device. You know what I mean? They're comfy in who they are. There's something about Waldorf in the way they are so seen. No one's trying to make you turn into anything. You just and you get an incredible education. I mean, they're doing all the things that you do in school, but they do it in a different way. It's really beautiful. And I remember one of the schools I went to in New York with Bear, the teacher would, and again, they were in, I think it was preschool at the time, but the children would walk into the classroom and oh, here's the biggest difference. So I would go touring other schools and you go to a kindergarten class and it was loud. And the teacher couldn't get them together. You should constantly trying to get them into a circle and like sit there and do just constant chaos, right? As you would expect. You go into a Waldorf kindergarten and everyone's quiet like a mouse and they're playing very, very peacefully. And if anything happens, the teacher might say, "Oh, no, thank you," or "Come, children." And they start singing, or they'll start gathering the children by singing a very quiet song. And all the children run over and they're like, "Oh," and they come to, I mean, it's just, they never go, "Get over here, everybody come here." It's none of that. It's just sort of it's all magical, and it's so the children are so respected and so seen, and that I think they just respect back, and it's really quite beautiful to watch. And I definitely, oh, I was going to tell you about this lady. When you walked into her class, she had a bowl of lavender water, and the children would come and greet her and in the morning, and she'd sit there, and they'd come to the front, they'd come into the room, and she'd say, "Hello, Bear, how are you?" And he or "Good morning, Bear," and he'd say, "Good morning, Mrs. Patricia, Mrs. Patricia," or something, Mrs. Patricia. And then she'd take his little hands and they just wash them gently in this lavender water. And then they go about to play. It was just, I don't know how to explain why that was such a sweet welcoming, but it touched me. And um, I love it. I love Waldorf so much.
And now that we're in the middle of the pandemic, are you taking a Waldorf type curriculum and incorporating that with him at home?
Yeah.
How has that adjustment been?
Um, it's been great. It's been great. It's lovely. I love doing it with him. And I love Waldorf. And it's been very sweet.
And how have you felt things have changed around the house being quarantined and being, at home during this pandemic with Bear and having that time together to, slow down more and connect as a family in a deeper way?
Well, I think that we always, to be honest, had an incredibly deep connection. And so it's not so different for us than how it was. Because I would take my son pre COVID to Bali for 3 weeks with just him and I. There's no, we're not using an iPad. We're not, um, on the airplane, I use an iPad. Let me be clear. Um, but once we were there, I'm not there's no babysitter. It's just him and I. So we would spend really deeply connected periods of time together for all the time. So that was normal for me. And it's always been the way I am with him. He comes to work with me. He spends all that time with me. So it wasn't, I'm lucky in that I didn't feel like this was suddenly some insanely different. The only thing that was difficult in the beginning was that I still had to work, so my work schedule didn't stop. I had a press tour and I had like two different things coming out at that time. And so I was like, I used to be able to count on those hours where he would go to school. And suddenly I was like, wait, what? And so you had to kind of squeeze what might be a normal 7 hour, 6 hour day into like 3 hours. And that felt really stressful at first. But then I started to flow and just, it was just a shock to the system at first. I was loving not getting up at 6:45 in the morning to go to school. I was loving us laying in bed, just talking and giggling. And then we'd go downstairs and make pancakes. And it was just it felt divine that way. I mean, I'm lucky. I have a beautiful home. I'm very, very safe here. I feel I know other people didn't have that. And I was so sorry for so many people that have lost their jobs and lost their income and lost their food. It's very, very, very serious what's happening for so many people. We were not those people. We have enough to to be okay, and I have space. I have a beautiful space. There's trees outside, right? So I didn't feel any kind of, you know. And I was working the whole time, and I got to be with my kids. So we would trampoline, we would jump rope, have jump rope contests, and I was very busy. I have to be honest. I didn't have a bored moment, unfortunately, to experience through this whole thing. I was either trying to work on how my activism was very, very high through this whole period, and then I was working on films. I had films come out and things. I have another movie coming out in 2 weeks called Sister of the Bride, and I'm going off. I just finished shooting something, so I've just been very busy during this time. But also just being his little mommy teacher is a big thing too, and figuring out his school was a big part of this time. Uh, yeah, and I'm so proud because we have these. I know I told you about My Kind Organics, but we have new products that we launched that are so specific to this time because it's a challenging time when you have when it starts to get colder every year, and especially now with what's happening. So um, we have a cough and mucus formula that is wonderful, and so it dislodges mucus and it makes your cough more productive, and it soothes your throat. And then we have elderberry and sleep, which is so lovely because if you're, if you're having a hard time falling asleep, or you're feeling super exhausted, and your brain's going too much, or you're not feeling good, the elderberry sleep puts you to sleep in a very gentle way. There's no hangover. There's no melatonin hangover at all. It's just herbs. You feel absolutely nothing the next day. And the elderberry and the echinacea and the zinc, all of that, all the echinacea and the elderberry and the zinc, all are helping to support your immune system while you're sleeping. So you're getting the benefits of both at the same time.
Alicia, you talked about having your time more compressed now that your son's home and navigating through that. I mean, as somebody who is doing so much, again, you're talking about your supplement line, you're a mom, you have your acting, your activism. Talk about pre-COVID, how you go about balancing your time and organizing your days, and then now post-COVID, how that's pivoted.
It depends. If he wakes up with me, I would have him in the morning, and then he would go, and I would take care of him, get him ready for school and all that. Then he'd go off to school, and then he'd come back, and I'd have him. His dad would take him to school and pick him up, and then drop him to me. And then I would take him, and I would feed him, and we'd take baths, and we'd get ready, and just all that cozy home time is the time that I love the most, and that's what I did with him. And of course, on the weekends, maybe we'd go to the beach or do something, but go to Gentle Barn or Farm Sanctuary to see the animals. We always went to the farmers market. That was a huge part of our life every Sunday, which I don't do anymore. I don't want to go to the farmers market the way it is. It's not at all enjoyable for me anymore. But you should still support them if it's okay for you. The farmers market was my church, and it's just the one that we go to. It's changed. It's not pleasant to be there with all the madness. Um, so um, so I don't do that anymore. But we grow tons of our own food anyway, and we always have. And and so it's not so different. Only he came to Florida with me for 2 of the weeks that I was shooting, and he stayed with me during that time. And he's going to come with me to do the Babysitters Club in Canada. He'll come for the whole month and stay with me. We'll just do his schoolwork during the week. And when I have to do something that I can't have him for, I'll have to find a babysitter. It's not often.
Talk more about your garden. What are you growing? How often are you replanting, and what does that look like?
I'm very weird about my garden. I don't like doing it in the winter. So I'm against winter gardens are not interesting to me. I don't know why. Just in the summer, I love my garden. I go in there every single day. I this year I grew tomatoes and these Jimmy peppers and shishito peppers um and all the things that I don't want to eat so much of, but I can't help it because it's growing, and then it doesn't make me feel that good because it's too much nightshades, but they're so yummy. And we have avocados because I have this big avocado tree, And what else am I growing? Kale always, cucumbers, um, basil, all the herbs. I'm trying to think of what's in the garden. Um, I was growing green beans. My squash did not grow this year. I do not know what happened. I refused to eat zucchini this summer. I wouldn't eat one slice of zucchini because I knew I was going to have zucchini. Because last year I had so much zucchini, I couldn't eat as much zucchini as I had, and so I wouldn't eat it. And then the summer went by, and my zucchini never grew. It grew into a huge, massive, beautiful plant with flowers, but it never sprouted any zucchinis. That was a bummer. Um, but now that it's winter, there's still some straggling tomatoes and basil, and I just don't even want it. I do, but it's not for me. I'm officially not into winter gardens. So that's the farmer's market and the store and stuff.
And is Bear into the gardening as well? I know for me, I have a young daughter at home who's 10 months now, and I'm excited as time goes on to get her more and more involved if she takes to it with me in the garden. And I could see how that could be a really enjoyable, for you, mother son activity.
It's so lovely, and I also thought that he would love it. And I have to say, Bear loves most things, but not gardening so much. he he's he loves cooking, and he loves me pulling the food from the garden and preparing it, but he never got as turned on to the gardening as, and he does it at school too. They do gardening in their school, and he's totally fine with it, and he does it with me, and he sits out there and he helps me pick stuff, but I can tell it's not his calling. There's a lot of things that are, that's not one of them as of now. We'll see what happens.
Alicia, you mentioned your upcoming movie, Sister of the Groom. I got to watch the trailer before we chatted, and it looks really funny and looks like a great film. Excited to check that out. But you've been so generous with your time. I wanna let you go, and I know you've been up doing a lot of press today, and you're probably ready to have a delicious plant based meal. But other than checking out the upcoming movie, how can people connect with you after the show?
Following me on Instagram is really good because I post, if you're interested in the food and the lifestyle, I post tons of videos of Bear cooking, me cooking, um, and showing you kind of what we're eating and how we're doing this, and so that it can help inspire you to go, oh, I can make that, or yeah, I know that food, that's delicious, I can do that. Recipes and just new finds. Whenever I find a new, like the Hue chocolate, or a new vegan cheese that blows my mind, or whatever it is, I post all that. I also have a website, thekindlife.com, and on my website I'm putting up a gift guide for Christmas and for the holiday season, and that's going to go up hopefully by the end of this week. So that will have all kinds of inspiration and ideas about how to have a compassionate and thoughtful consumer experience and holiday. Um, and what else? I guess that's it. I'm on Twitter and Facebook and all the other things. I post to all of those places, mostly about my life and activism, and and sometimes a lot about my work, because it's all mixed in.
That's a beautiful way to live, having it all come together in one beautiful, the essence of everything you do is just so connected, and that's a beautiful thing.
Thank you.
It's all gonna be linked up, Alicia, over in the show notes, everything that we just talked about. And one last thing, as you mentioned, seeing Bear over on your social media, I'm just curious, again, having a young daughter and navigating that whole world. Um, what is it? Was it a decision for you when you decided to share so much of Bear at a young age? Was that something you contemplated how you go about navigating that, or was it right away you knew you wanted to put him out there and share the lifestyle you guys live together?
It's complicated because for sure, prior to having a child, like, I didn't want I don't I have paparazzi follow me all the time, and that was just my life. It's always been that way, and they go through moods. There was a period, I don't know, a few months ago, where they were following me every day. And I was like, "It's just the same thing. We're just walking again." And it was just every day following and taking pictures and reporting it. Like, she's on a walk, and it was every day. And that's my life. And so I knew that when I had a child, this was the first taste I had of it. I was pregnant, I gave birth, and they parked their cars, like 7 cars were outside my door for 7 weeks. They did not leave. 7 weeks of essential stalking. I could not leave. I wasn't going to leave anyway, and that's what they didn't know. They were waiting there, and I was like, "Their problem. I'm not leaving." And, they stayed out there because they were waiting for a photo of me and Bear, and that's what they do. They do that to everyone, I'm sure. But I knew that that would be such a stressful, crazy, chaotic experience to have with my child as the first thing. So what I did and what I was shown, people told me how to do this who have been here before. They said, "You put out the first picture. So if you put out the first picture, they'll all drive away." And sure enough, so whereas 5 weeks old, we do a photo shoot to take this picture. We release it a few weeks later, and all the cars drive away. So what I realized in that moment, this experiment, is that if I post pictures of Bear that I can control, that show what I love, and help the world, you know, am I showing? I'm showing people that a beautiful, healthy, amazing little kid exists, and there are many of them who are eating a plant-based diet and living a righteous, healing, responsible lifestyle. And I think that's important. So it's an act, it's a choice for activism. Do I want to respect his privacy? Yes. And so I would, when Bear says no camera, no camera. If and I don't even pull out the camera that often, to be honest. It might appear that way, but in general, I don't. Um, but but if at any point he feels remotely uncomfortable, I will stop it immediately. But he really has told me over and over again how much he appreciates telling. He wants to help. He knows what's happening in the world, and he wants to help. So I think he just did the voice. Someone just asked him to do a voiceover for Mercy for Animals, talking about uh, what happens to the animals, the little baby chickens. And I asked him, "Do you want to do this? They're not asking me; they're asking you. Do you want to do this?" He said, "I do," and so he did it. And so yes, I think ultimately it has made my life less chaotic and less stressful for him, because when we were walking at the farmers market and he was about, I don't know how old he was, maybe 3 or 4, a swarm of photographers were on me, and it's very scary, and I'm trying to hold my baby and get to the car as quickly as I can. He's not a baby, he's like 3 or 4, but he's big. I'm holding him in my arms, and I've got bags, and it's just scary and stressful. And he didn't know yet. He'd seen cameras before around me, tons, because obviously they still follow you, but they do it less. So he looked at me and he said, "Mommy, why are they trying to take pictures of us?" Like, he didn't understand yet. And so I think by exposing him a little bit in such healthy, life affirming ways that can help this world, I think it has minimized some of the chaos that comes with being a famous person.
That makes sense. Sounds like you've navigated it in a beautiful way, and you're just doing so much beautiful work in the world. I want to thank you and thank you for your time and all the best to you, Alicia.
Thank you. Enjoy your little 10-month-old baby girl. You're so lucky. That's amazing.
It's a beautiful time. It's our first one, so we're learning a lot and keeping busy, but we're having a lot of fun and we're just totally in love.
Of course you are. It's divine.
It's
Savor
the
every
best.
moment.
We do. Thank you.
Thank you.